Hello, this is Chapter 3, Lesson 2, The Pilgrims and the Puritans. All right, let's first look at the vocab. We have the stock company. A stock company is owned by people who own the company stock. So in other words, whoever has the company sells stock to it, so you have multiple owners to raise the money to start the business, and it's kind of like a lot of what is done today, but this was early on. They called it a stock company. A share, a certificate bought from a stock company that represents a certain part of ownership of the company. In other words, you go to the stock exchange today, you buy shares in a company. Same type of thing. How many shares you own depends on how much you buy, and then that depends on what dividends or profits you get from it. An investor, a person who lends money to a company. The investor hopes to receive more money back when the company makes money. All right, so again, playing the stock market today. You buy stocks that you think are going to go up in value, which means that you get what are called dividends. You get paid as that stock goes up, or if it goes up a lot and you just want to sell it and take the profits, you can do that too. But at this time, it was a new concept and was referred to as a stock company. So, a kind of company called a stock company helped colonization. These companies were owned by people who owned shares of the company's stock. Shares are parts of a company. Stock companies were interested in trade and profit. They rewarded investors for the risks involved in settling a new colony. People who invested their money hoped to earn a profit. However, they could also lose money. The Plymouth Company was a stock company. Its charter granted to the company the rights to settle in Virginia. However, they settled in what is now called New England. The company's first attempt to establish a colony was a disaster. Poor planning in the cold winter forced the colonists to return to England. Who were the Pilgrims? Religious problems increased in England under the rule of James I. The king was very unhappy with the group of people who did not share his religious ideas. Members of this group were known as separatists, or pilgrims. They wanted to break away from the Church of England completely. James I did not accept this group and treated them very harshly. Many of them fled to Holland and Western Europe. Holland, or the Netherlands as it is called today, was Dutch. The pilgrims were not comfortable in this setting. The Dutch people had a different language and a different way of life. Many pilgrims thought about going to the New World, but they did not know how to get there. Ships and supplies were expensive and they could not afford them. So what plan did the pilgrims make? A determined group of pilgrims formed a stock company and bought as many shares as they could. Much more money was needed, so the pilgrims were able to get the additional money from wealthy investors of the London Company. Many members of the London Company were interested in setting up a new colony. The investors were willing to pay for ships and all the supplies. However, the pilgrims had to agree to certain conditions. Number one, the pilgrims could settle on land that belonged to the London Company in Virginia. Number two, the settlers would have to work for 7 years and give all the profits back to the investors. And three, after the 7-year period was over, the settlers would be on their own and free to do as they wished. The small group of pilgrims plus a large number of other people set off on the Mayflower. After a 64-day voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, the small crowded vessel reached the shores of what is now Cape Cod in 1620. The ship had blown off course, scouts were sent out to explore the region, and a month later the pilgrims sailed to their new site, which they called Plymouth. What was the Mayflower Compact? While the Mayflower was anchored in the waters off Cape Cod, the pilgrims held a meeting on the cabin of the ship. They had landed outside of their chartered destination, and they were not bound to their charter this far north, so they seized the opportunity to set up their own rules of government. The group elected John Carver as its first leader. William Bradford was elected after Carver died. Bradford was the leader for most of the next 30 years. Choosing a leader was very important. The passengers agreed that laws passed by the majority of the group would be obeyed. They wrote the Mayflower Compact in 1620 to represent their ideas. Rule of majority is still a main part of our democratic government, which is government ruled by the people. Okay, now we have some other vocab here. Destination, a place where one is going. Yeah, it's pretty basic. Majority, a number greater than half of the total. I think we understand majority rules. And democratic, a government in which the people, the power is held by the people. Okay, we do not live in a democracy, though. We live in a federated republic, but don't let that worry you. I just don't want to give you bad information. We live in a democratic society. Okay. A great historical event had taken place. This was the first time European Americans had set up their own government. They agreed to obey the laws of the majority made. The Mayflower Compact could not solve all of the problems that they would face, but the Mayflower Compact could not solve all the problems of the colony. The poor soil, cold winters, heavy debt, and strict religious practices were difficult problems. Because of their strong religious views, the Pilgrims were not able to attract more settlers. In time, the settlement was a success. Who were the Puritans? The Puritans was a religious group. Like the Pilgrims, they were unhappy with the way the king treated them. When Charles I became king in 1625, problems increased. He did not approve of their religious ideas. It was difficult for the king to deal with Puritans. There were many of them in Parliament, and they were well educated. Parliament is the group in England that makes the laws, similar to our Congress here in the United States. Charles I took strong measures to keep the Parliament under control. Officials were removed from government positions, and ministers were not allowed to be part of the church. Many Puritans were put into prison. In 1629, some wealthy Puritans decided to go to America. They obtained a charter in the name of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Then 1,000 colonists included teachers, doctors, lawyers, ministers, merchants, and well-to-do country gentlemen. The Puritans spent a great deal of time planning, organizing, and gathering provisions, and they were well aware of the dangers and problems that lay ahead. The group of Puritans that set out for America with a fleet of 15 ships. They landed in Boston, Massachusetts in 1630. John Winthrop became the governor of the new settlement. Within a few years, nearly 10,000 colonists came to this settlement. Because the expedition was well managed, it was a success. The Puritans also had very strong religious ideas. They had journeyed a great distance to worship as they pleased. Because they had suffered under a cruel king, it was very important for them to have religious freedom. However, they did not grant this freedom to others. All laws dealing with religion, trade, business, and government were made according to Puritan beliefs. Every colonist was expected to follow these laws. Stern measures were taken to make sure people would follow. Okay? And then you have the review questions. Decide whether each statement below tells about the Pilgrims or the Puritans. Write Pilgrims or Puritan beside each number on a sheet of paper. So again, you don't have to write out the statement. Just write Pilgrims or Puritans next to the number for the statement. And look at the what do you think? What do you think the Puritans wanted religious freedom but did not want to grant that from? I'm sorry. Why do you think the Puritans wanted religious freedom but did not want to grant that freedom to others? Right? This is something to think about because the early settlement in what is now Massachusetts could be called what is now referred to as a theocracy. It's a government based upon religious beliefs. When we think of it in today's terms, we think of mostly Middle Eastern countries who set up their government based upon Muslim law. All right. In many ways, the Puritans were that strict. And as we'll discover, because they were so strict and not giving religious freedom to other people, many people left the Massachusetts Bay Colony and went on to settle what is now Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. So the people that they pissed off so much they had to get the heck out of there went off to other parts of what we now call New England and formed their own colonies. But again, we'll get to that a little later in the chapter. All right? As always, any questions, just let me know, or see me, on Friday for the tutoring process, or just jot them down somewhere. And when we have the face-to-face classes, you can ask me, and we'll go over it. All right? All right. Thank you, guys.